Tse tempe trinle yarngo da pelge drolor zampe zebraci pande lame shabla solvade. Oma Guru Vajradhara Suma Timu Nisha Sane Karm Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Oma Guru Vajradhara Suma Timu Nisha Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Oma Guru Vajradhara Suma Timu Nisha Sane Karm Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Om A Guru Vajradhara Suma Timu Nisha Sane Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Om A Guru Vajradhara Suma Timu Nisha Sane Karm Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Om Guru Vajradhara Suma Timu Nisha Sane Karm Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum. Pakyukye Kudhanayandagi Loya Pakyukye Sungdhanayandagi Pakyukye Tudhanayandagi Teyerme Chiktu Jingiolo Pakyuke Kudang Dhagilu Pakyuke Sundandagina Pakyuke Tudang Dhagi Töyerme Chiktu Chingilo Makyuke Kudang Dhagilu Makyuke Sundandagina Makyuke Tudang Dhagi Töyerme Chiktu Chingilo. Om Muni Maha shipu ki chushi meto Chamare rabalingashi ni de gempadi sange shintu te ulwarki drokunam da shingla Chöpar shoyedam guru ratna mindrala kam niryatayami Sangye chödan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi Dagi chushe gibe sonam ki Drola pinchira sangye druparasho Sangye chudan tsogi chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi Dagi chushe gibe sonam ki Drola pinchira sangye drupar Sho sangye chudan tsogi chonam la Chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi Dagi chushe gibe sonam ki Drola pinchira sangye druparasho
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment through the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo yalhaye ke da ludan vijinke drupodadami kenamdan drowakunge dranam chitsampa tamche ke tu dagi chöten to tamche ke tu dagi chöten to. Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Succede spesso
It often happens within traditions when
c'è qualcosa che viene visto come importante,
it's seen as something important.
quindi viene detto di essere ripetuto.
W- When something is seen as important, it's repeated. And at a certain point, to make sure that that so-called procedure action gets repeated, a kind of, what's the term? Not a ceremony, but a ritual. A ritual.
Viene trasformato in
It's transformed into ritual.
un po' come per dire
a little bit like saying in a more mundane aspect, at work, there are all the protocols. And when you do this, you need to do this, and then this is the next step, etc., etc. And then when you do that kind of job, everyone will bring his own, a little bit of his own self, but the procedures should be respected. And in Dharma, it's the same thing. There are many things that we can call procedures because they're important, and so that we don't lose them, so we don't lose them. They're repeated, and sometimes they're seen as rituals, or it becomes a ritual. And the danger of a ritual is that when that action becomes a ritual and one doesn't connect to the reason behind it. So, for example, when we begin teachings, as you just saw, we do some prayers, some recitations at the beginning, and it becomes a bit ritualistic. We recite that, but it goes far beyond. And so every once in a while, we can't always, but sometimes I like to explain what we do at the beginning of teachings. I don't do it as a ritual. I do it so that you can connect to what's behind it. But if you don't know the meaning, then that would be hard for you. So I'd like to explain a little bit so that you can connect to what we do. First of all, if I can share something with you, it's because someone transmitted it to me. Someone taught me. It's said, I can say that I don't have anything to teach you that I didn't learn myself. And even though I've learned it, or it's been handed down to us, but we need to repeat it, So, for example, we could say, okay, Buddha Shakyamuni said it. We can take the sutras. Why do we need to repeat it? So that it can be, so we can keep it alive. We have also the Dharma has this task of adapting to the mentality of each person. So the first prayer, we say prayer, but that's not the right term. Actually, the word prayer, what does the word prayer make reference to? Or what does it, like I beg you, I pray. In Old English, I pray is I'm making a request. I do pray. But here, we're not asking for something. The term in Tibetan, there's Munlam. Munlam means the path of aspiration. So when we say, for example, in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment, with the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I reach Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. I'm not asking for anything. I'm directing my mind, my aspiration. What do I want? Where do I want to go? I'm looking at my own motivation, and I'm using the words for that. So it's not right to use the word prayer, but we could say verses of aspiration. We translate them as aspirational prayers. So also the next Locho Sampo Pakyuta Shipa, after the mantra, and then the mantra Oma Guru Vajatara Sumati Muni Shasane Karma Uttavadana Shivaja Sarvat Siddhi Home. It's a verse of request for the blessings to our root guru. In my case, my root guru, and in also for many of you, Lama Ganshin Rinpoche, because at the beginning we need to connect with who has given us these transmissions and generate gratitude. And from my side, I connect with the fact that I am not doing anything other than sharing what I have received. So it also helps he who transmits, me in this case, Lama Michel, and so he who is sharing doesn't feel special. It's a kind of so this so-called ritual begins there. Normally, it begins with the entrance of he who teaches. Um, those receiving stand. You'll see that I make prostrations, and if you watch more carefully, you'll see that before I actually sit down, I snap my fingers. I mean, this act of sitting here on a throne is not to give importance to the person, but to what is then going to be transmitted. It's a respect to the Dharma, to our path, to what we're here doing together, not this place and this throne. It's the respect is given first and foremost to the teachings, and then also to he who teaches or shares. And then after the death of Buddha, for example, when his disciples got together, at the time they had a memory, an incredible memory for this oral teachings, and they got together. And those who had a certain level of spiritual realization, they took their yellow cloak and they piled them up and made a kind of throne. And then each one sat down one by one and shared the teachings that he had received from Buddha. In this occasion, that's why all the sutras of Buddha start with digi dagi. One day I so heard. I found in Rajgira or wherever it was, together with Buddha, there was this, that, and that other person. This was the context, and in that context, so Rabdur or Ananda Avalokiteshvara asked this question, and then Buddha answered like this. In all sutras begin like this. It's interesting because I can't say that there aren't, but they're extremely rare sutras where Buddha taught something without having been first requested. Anyway, after Buddha's death, after this meeting, there's this tradition that whoever then shares his teachings, and he sits on a kind of throne out of respect for the teachings more than for the person. So when I come in and I make 3 prostrations, it's my act of respect towards my guru, towards the teachings. And when I snap my fingers, it makes reference to impermanence, the coming and going of things. I should remind us that life goes by. So it's to remind myself that I will die. And what does this mean? That it's useless to stay attached to my image or any kind of power. I need to be deeply sincere with my own path and what I do, because once this body finishes, we are here alone with ourselves, which doesn't mean that there aren't various supporters or people can help us, but we're in front of our own reality. It's a way for me to remind myself. I mean, and this is tradition too. This has been done. This is what's done always. It's also to remind myself, to remind he who teaches to not fall into the traps of mundane existence. Then after we make the request to our guru, then first we do Locho Sampo Pakyuta Shipa, and then there's 4 lines, the request of blessings, and then there's the mantra of the guru, Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Muni Shasana Karma Uddavardhana Shiva Sarva Siddhi Hum. And then we do the longer prayer, the longer prayer, Dagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Duje Chen, or going to the shorter prayer, Pakyuke Kudan Dagilu or Makyuke Kudan Dagilu. This is where we are remembering we're asking for the blessings of our master, generating gratitude and asking for blessings. And then we do the mantra of Buddha Shakyamuni, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. This is when we connect with the entire lineage all the way up to Buddha Shakyamuni. Let's remember that I received these teachings from my masters who received from their masters all the way up to Buddha Shakyamuni. So this is a moment where we pay homage to Buddha Shakyamuni and connect with Buddha, the historic Buddha. After this, we do what is called the mandala offering, and today we do it with this melody,
Okay?
with the melody Sashipuki. As we do this verse, we use this mudra that represents Mount Meru and the four continents. This would be our planet, the universe. And when we make an offering, we imagine that we are offering the entire universe to as a basis to ask for teachings, because traditionally in traditionally one shouldn't teach without having been asked, and one shouldn't not teach if one is asked. So the rule is you shouldn't teach something if you're not asked. You couldn't go to someone and say, you need to understand this, you need to learn this thing. No. I theoretically couldn't teach something if there wasn't the request on the other side. If a request comes, normally 3 times, the request should be made 3 times, not one right after the other. One needs to let some time lapse. So once a request is made that is sincere and there are the right conditions, and the person who receives it and has the conditions and the knowledge to transmit that, he needs to do it. So this is the rule, let's say. And let's remember that in Buddhism, we don't have this concept to convert others or to make them understand something. There's no proselytismo in English, because we need the person requesting needs to have a sincere desire for that thing. And if we use analogy that's not great, if someone is, for example, addicted to some substance, alcohol or drugs, and one wants to help that person, if that person doesn't want to be helped, it's just not going to work. So actually, if we want to help someone, we need to sometimes have the patience to wait and create the conditions for that person to ask for help. Because when that person asks for help, then what is offered is deeply valued. And similarly, in transmitting the Dharma, the request needs to be made. So at the beginning of the teachings, we make the mandala offering together with this verse. So it's the request on he who is going to receive the teachings to ask for it. Normally, I begin that verse, but if we were a more formal context, there would be the choir master, so-called umse, who would begin the verses, and other people who would come up to the throne and offer the master. I've been to many teachings where it was the master himself who began the verse, so it's nothing out of the ordinary. After that, then comes the question: why are we here? So now we generate our motivation. It's when we recite the verse Sangye Chodam Soge Chodam. In Buddha Dharma Sangha, I take refuge into enlightenment with the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. That's when we reconnect with why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing. I mean, why are we here and not at the lake or doing who knows what? Why are we here together in this moment? Oh, because I want to help every being get out of suffering. So we start from a motivation that's altruistic, a motivation based on love and compassion that also turn to ourselves to help others. I need to get out of the cycle of suffering myself. May I perfect my qualities so that I can help all beings. May I become a Buddha to help everyone and every being. And to do that, I want to practice the six perfections: generosity and patience, enthusiastic effort, morality, and concentration and wisdom. Actually, when we begin the teachings, this verse is a little bit modified. Not too much, because if you're at the beginning, you learn one way and then you hear it in a different, you can get confused. But it's also right to know that you can do differently. Normally, when there are teachings, this verse is transformed, and we say, Sangye chudan soge chunam la chanchu barduda nikyap suchi. He who teaches says, Dagi chushi. And if you're receiving the teachings, you say Dagi Chunning Sugi. So Dagi Chushe, and he who receives, Dagi Chunning. The translation would be, in the Buddha and Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of, or with the merits of teaching the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit all sentient beings. And he who receives, with the merits received of listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So the point is, in this moment, we are going, and we were together connecting with our motivation. We're generating within an intention that is coherent with our objective, our higher objective. After this, at that moment, I recite by myself with this mudra of teaching the Dharma, and then there are different ways of doing it. Normally, I recite the shorter one. The mudra represents the mudra of teaching the Dharma. So this gesture is saying, I am here, and what I am doing is sharing, what I'm going to do is share the teachings of the Buddha. It's said, what's recited is Lama in the language of the Devas, in the language of Nagas, and the Duching, I don't know how to translate, and human beings, in every language that exists, according to the language that exists, and in all the languages, I will share the Dharma. In all the languages, I will share the Dharma. This means that in this moment, the one teaching imagines that he's adapting to the reality of everyone. And when we talk about language, it's not about Italian, English, Tibetan. It's about adapting oneself to everyone's reality. So this refers to the needs and the needs of adapting, the commitment to adapt to the needs of those listening. And it's also said that during Buddha's teachings, those who received teachings at that time were not only human beings. In some sutras, there's also the description of other beings who were there present, other life forms, other sentient beings, spirits, gods, semi-gods. In some sutras, it says there were not very many people, but many, many other beings. So one imagines sharing the Dharma also with just all forms of life that are present. I have no ability to see something like that, but one tries to generate that motivation and that connection. And it's important that in that moment, one generates the awareness of why one is teaching, and tries to adapt to those who are listening. So to recap, first we pay homage to the Dharma, the one who's is teaching. Those who teach remembers the gratitude and respect, because if the teacher comes with an emotion of superiority or some attitude that blocks, then what is taught is not pure. So making prostrations, we take away those barriers, that judgment, that superiority. And then we ask for blessings of the lineage, the blessings of Buddha Shakyamuni. We make the request for teachings, after which we generate the motivation as to why we're here, and then we remember that the teachings are adapted to the mentality of everyone. Since we've opened up this subject, I'll just take advantage to say something I wasn't expecting to say, but let's do it. When we listen to Dharma teachings in general, we talk about eliminating the 3 defective vessels and generating the 6 attitudes. And normally, now you'll hear often, okay, now listen carefully to the Dharma, and make sure that you abandon the 3 defective vessels and generate the 6 awarenesses. The 3 defective containers, imagine a vase, a vessel. So the first defective vase is one that's upside down. And no matter how much water you pour on top, no liquid can enter. That's when one comes to listen to teachings, but one's mind is somewhere else, or maybe one's sleeping. So if one is physically there, but the mind is who knows where, obviously nothing will be absorbed. The second defective vessel is when the vase is in the right position but is dirty. If you put poison inside, it doesn't matter how pure that water is, then that water will be poisoned. And that's when we go to someone and we're there with some kind of anger, jealousy, resentment, negative emotions, or some kind of judgment. No matter what we receive, we will pollute that with this negative mind. So at the beginning we should at least neutralize our negative emotions if they're present. Come to the present moment. And then the third defective vessel is when the vase is in the right position. It's clean, but it's full of holes. So the water goes in, and then it goes out. From my experience, I don't think I've never met anyone without a hole or 2. We all have them. So what can we do? First of all, try to be as present as possible. And secondly, when those teachings are finished, that water that's in the vase, if we use it to water our imprints, our potentials, the seeds and the sprouts, the plants within, that water transforms and it stays within. In other words, if the teachings are used and put into practice, they stay in our memory. Instead, if it's just a nice concept that we learned, after a while we'll lose it. The 6 awarenesses are, the first is seeing oneself as a patient, or rather, why do I want to listen to Dharma teachings? Because I need to, not because I want to become a teacher. It's not because I want to show off. It's not because I need to be here for some reason. It's not because I want to use this to teach it to someone else. No, I want it for my own inner process. I see myself as a patient. The one who teaches that second awareness is seen as the doctor. So I go to someone who gives me a diagnosis and a treatment. When we go to a doctor, we need a treatment, right? So the teachings that we receive are the medicine, the treatment. I'm the patient. The teacher is like the doctor. The teachings are the medicine, the treatment, and the fourth awareness, the process, the healing process comes by taking the medicine, by following the treatment. If I go to a doctor, I have the visit, I'm happy to go to the doctor. It was a wonderful visit. I liked what he said. I buy the medicine in the pharmacy. I can even buy more than I need because I want to keep following the prescription. But if I just keep it there in my house and I don't take it, is the treatment going to work for me? Maybe some kind of placebo effect I'll have, but the actual treatment comes when one follows the prescription and takes the medicine. And similarly, the teachings work once you put them into practice. The teachings work when you put them into practice. So I'm like the patient. He who transmits the Dharma is like the doctor. The teachings themselves are the medicine, are like the medicine. Actually, I jumped one. The fourth awareness is I can get better. I have this ability and possibility of being cured. The healing process comes by taking the medicine, putting into practice the teachings, and the sixth awareness is that the healing process is long and graduated because my sickness is chronic. I've had it for a long time. Changing our deeper habits is possible, but requires time and constancy. So when we receive a teaching, presence, a clean heart, we're present in the present moment. I'm here because I need to receive something, because I want to get out of my own sufferings. I want to develop my own qualities. It's something I need. The one who transmits to me is giving me something. The one who is transmitting the Dharma is not doing the job for me, but he's there to concede something. He's to give me something that I can use to heal myself. A doctor's job, for example, is not to heal us, but to give us the right diagnosis, give us the right medicine so that we can heal ourselves. And so the guru is like the doctor, and the Dharma is like the medicine. I am sure, I'm confident that I can heal, that I can get out of this cycle of samsara, this cycle of ignorance, mental defilements, and actions done based on those karma and negative minds. And it's by taking the medicine, by putting into practice the teachings, I heal. And it takes time. There's no hurry to get there. There's hurry only to start walking in the right direction, but not to actually get to our starting point. You know, I do everything in 3 weeks and I'm already there. Some time ago, a couple weeks ago actually, when we were doing the teachings on self-healing, and someone asked me something, and it was the first time I heard this question in a very direct way. A new person asked, what are you teaching? And I explained, and he asked, what does this course promise? So like, you do this course and then what happens to you? And I started thinking, the real question is nothing. I can't promise anything. I mean, depends on how you integrate these teachings. It depends on the predispositions that you have within. It depends on thousands of different things. Um, I can't say the objective of self-healing is to gradually to to face one's own shadows and develop oneself to enlightenment. It's you can't say do this and this will happen. It depends on an infinite number of factors. Mostly, it depends on where one is already. There are certain people that have very potentiated, very strong seeds. A little bit of water, comes out a marvelous plant. Other people's seeds are a little more dried out and they need more time. We all have these seeds. It depends on each one's predisposition as well. So when we begin a teaching, we try to connect with all of this so that we can make the best of this opportunity that we have. Now let's get back to our text. Which, if anybody's listening in English, I forgot mine. Can you take the English version from Lama? Sorry, I'm so embarrassed. Thank you, Elkanah. Oh, and he doesn't have it. Okay, that's okay. I'll do. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, so sorry, I just needed the text. Okay. When we practice Dharma, when we choose to follow a spiritual path, there are some necessary conditions to be able to practice well.
Ok, ci siamo.
The three fundamental conditions to be able to follow a spiritual path are three. Having the minimum necessary, materially speaking, having someone to guide us correctly, and have the desire to practice. But first of all, this to say, to have material, the necessary material conditions are necessary, to have minimum amount of comfort. Then what would happen is our comfort, our energy would all go towards our survival. If I don't have food to eat, if I don't have a safe place to live, if I can't protect myself from the heat or cold or take care of my health, if I don't have the minimum indispensable for my survival, then all of my vital energy will be taken up by survival itself. So this is what's necessary. But what happens is when we see why we're here and what we really want, the first verse of the text that says abandon every doubt and hesitation, and we talked about the two paradigms. On one side, we have this paradigm of the material utopia, and the other side we have the spiritual utopia. As we've said, at the end of the day, the two paradigms, they can't be together. You can't have them both. They don't overlap. Either I act and I give my priority to how I live the world, how I relate to everything, and inner qualities, inner traits that I can develop, or I give priority to the reality around myself so that I try to shape the world into what I want. But this doesn't take away the fact that I need to eat. I live in a material reality. I live in a social context where, as Lama Ganchen said once jokingly, said, even if you go on retreat in the mountain cave, you'll still need to 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 pay. You'll still need to pay your taxes. Uh, so you know, un unless you make it your first home and you can avoid property taxes. But just jokes aside, we live in a society where we cannot of where very, very few can not have to worry about the resources and how they live. But here, this is something very delicate. There's a danger here. We're very conditioned, strongly conditioned by this material utopia. I believe that most of us, we're following a process of consciously trying to go from a material utopia to a spiritual utopia. And when we talk about our attachment to material things, there are three types. The material objects, money, physical objects, material objects, homes and cars, or anything of this kind. One of my greatest attachments is this cushion, for example. So hard to find, designed by Lumpur Thata in Thailand. It's one of my masters he's from the Theravada tradition. He came here as the abbot of the Dharmakaya monastery in Thailand. Anyway, regardless of what it is, a material object, other mundane things are the recognition, our recognition, how other people see us, how we think other people see us. And the next are this attachment to this dopamine and sensory pleasures in general. These three aspects are part of our lives. In the sense, as long as we have this body and we live in this society, we need to relate to material things, don't we? We need to travel, to be here. I mean, money is part of all of this. And just a quick side note, more and more I see that in our Western society, modern Western society, but part of the Western world, it's interesting to see that there are three things that are extremely present in our society, and at the same time, there are three taboos. The first is money. It's normal. Is it normal that we need to pay for everything, that money is absolutely everywhere, but it's something that we can't talk about? It's a taboo. It's difficult to talk about, to ask about. It's often a great source of difficulty, but it's also something extremely present in our society. Then the second taboo that we have is sex. It's something that in our society is extremely present. So what does a couch have to do with sex? It's just the car, the advertising. There's this sensuality, the use of sexual energy to create attraction for a product. It's everywhere, but it's also a taboo. I remember once I was talking to a boy in India, and I asked him. He was from Tibet, actually, from a very small village, and I asked him. I said, "How many brothers and siblings do you have?" And he said, "No, there are 9 of us." But from the same mother, same father. I said, no, I had a brother. My father went far to make money, and he was there for a year or so. And when he came back, his 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 wife was pregnant, and so he was born and he grew up at home. So no problem. Lama Ganchen had two fathers because in Tibet it was very normal. In certain villages where there were more men than women, then the woman married more than one man. In opposite contexts, and then in the opposite happened because the function of the husband, of the father, was to bring sustenance. So if you had two husbands, and one could go out and make money, and the other could stay home and take care of things at home. And if one died, for example, then there was some kind of security. It was Lama Ganchen's brother had 13 children with 5 different women. I met a woman who had 5 husbands. It was something absolutely, it was normal. There weren't so many problems in the modern world. That's already changed a lot. But in if that you see that you don't talk about sex, but it's not a taboo. Instead, for us, it's ever present, and yet we can't talk about it. And then the last one is death. The last taboo. It's present in video games for children. Or they're constantly killing. It's present in the news, in the films, and everything. It's present everywhere, but we can't talk about it. When we get to death, it's not something that we should talk about or face. And it's really interesting to see these things that are extremely present, but at the same time, they're taboos. We can't talk about them. We can't face them so openly. That's the end of what I have to say about that, but I leave that open for you to reflect on it. So to live, we have a body. With this body, we need to eat, we need to protect ourselves. We need to protect ourselves from heat and cold. In the center, for example, I mean, there are costs to be here. I mean, how much does the center, how much does it cost here at the center? From the average monthly cost from January to June is an average of 3,000 euros. 3,000 euros a month. That's a lot. I mean, how much do you think it costs to heat up this enormous space? You know, there's the heating and then the cooling. We can't go to the electric company and say we pay you with our merits, and then everything else. It's beyond. And it was a huge challenge. I wanted. It's a huge challenge. I said I want teachings also to be free. You know, very, very few places in Europe are able to offer this. Anyway, money is part of the functioning of things, and it's the same with the center. It's the same for each one of us. And what about our image and our relationship with other people? It's part of our lives. Naturally, you know, how people see us and our position in our family, at work is part of our lives. And pleasures are also part of our life. The real problem, and this verse of today is about this. The problem is when our our wealth, our goods, and our image and our pleasures, when they become an end in and of themselves and not a means, when we live for these things, or when even not when we talk about life in general, but even today or the specific action. So this the verse says it says it says it says when you do something, the choices that you take in your life, don't take those choices where your final objective is money, recognition, or pleasures. These things are part of your life, but don't live your life for these things. For example, related to me, it happened not too long ago that in managing everything, it's just reality that the 3,000 so we had we have the monthly cost, the average cost, and what actually comes in is drastically less. So it's a little bit of an emergency, but it's happened in the past that we haven't had the resources to keep the center up, and so at that point we ask ourselves, well, what do we do to have more resources? And more than once, I had to go back to to the exercise of saying, never are we going to choose an activity to that would be more lucrative economically. For example, let's do the course like this because we'll get more money, or let's do this course so that we have more money. So even if we don't want to have a profit, but because of the necessities of the center, if you do something like that, you have polluted the motivation. So money is part of this, but you don't do it for that. The real profit of the center is what happens in the hearts and minds of those who come. That's what we're looking to increase. But if I start doing things where I say, I'm going to do this, and the primary reason in that moment is because I need to make more, to make this or make that, then I've polluted it. And it's like a stain of oil that just it spreads out. Like long time ago in Milan, um, the center was having financial difficulties, and someone said, why don't we have courses of tantric sex? It would make so much money. I said, first of all, it doesn't exist in our tradition. It doesn't exist in Buddhism. I don't know how it works. I don't know what it is. It's not part of my reality. Without judgment, but that's not something that exists in our tradition. So it's important for us in our own lives, here where it says abandon or don't follow uh, money and your image. Of course, this is part of our lives, but it's not the reason we do things. So if someone comes to me and says, can you pray for me or help me because I have something at work, or I'm looking for work, or so it's something in my job that needs to go in a certain way, I always try to say, okay, you can dedicate your energy or make prayers so that work goes in a certain way. so you can to find a job, but don't do it as the final objective. You connect it with why you're doing it. No, I need to have a good job that allows me to have the necessary resources, to have inner space that so that I can dedicate my life seriously to that which will be good for me and good for others. Because if I don't have a material stability, I won't be able to practice the Dharma well. Of course, there are exceptions, but it's important for us to ask why we do what we do and not fall in this trap. You slip very easily into this trap where I say that it's a means, but I'm living it as an end. I don't know if that's clear. And this trap has 3 levels. The coarse level is the material level. Just under is the trap of pleasures. So this attachment that we have to our sensory pleasures. We do things, we do many things just for pleasures. Even we say, oh, it's not for the pleasure. Difficult, huh? But the hardest, the most subtle trap is this attachment to our image and our and recognition, and that mixes a lot with our spiritual practice. For example, there is this trap. Let's say I help someone, but very easily one falls into the trap where the reason why I help that person at the end of the day is not because I care about the well-being of that person. I mean, I also care about that person's well-being, but it's not the primary reason. My real reason is I want to be the one who helps. I'm nourishing my own ego. I am the one who loves, the one who's compassionate, who does this, that, and the other. It's obvious. It's better to nourish our own ego by helping others than by hurting them. So I don't mean to say, oh, what a bad thing. You're helping other people and nourishing your ego. No, just at the same time that you're doing something wonderful, you're also fooling yourself. I don't know if that's clear. So along our path that starts from that first question, what do I want? Very easily we can fall into this materialistic utopia. So we say not doing things for material things, for recognition, for pleasures. By telling ourselves to not doing that, it's a way to keep us from falling into that material utopia that we're so used to. I think that's clear. So there's nothing wrong with having pleasures. Nothing at all. Let's enjoy our lives. You need to eat. Well, eat something that you like if it's good. But if there's nothing, if what you have to eat is not what you like, that's fine too. The problem is when these things start conditioning our lives. If I don't have to eat the way I like, I start becoming dissatisfied, nervous. It takes up a large space of my mind. I need to find food like this, or a little bit like that experience that I've told a couple times. I went to a restaurant without any kind of expectations, and it was fantastic. And I was trapped because I got out of the restaurant, and one thought that just kept coming back again and again was, how can I find food? A restaurant as good as this one. And I did something once and I actually download the application of the Michelin guide to look for certain restaurants of a certain level, to try to recreate that experience. And then I looked at that and I saw it for 5 minutes, and then and then I eliminated it. So the problem is not eating something that we like. That's wonderful. But the problem is when that becomes an objective and that conditions our lives and we live for that and we do what we do to reach that, re- regardless of, of what the pleasure is. Look, so you should enjoy what's there, and it's fine when it's not there, even without any kind of sense of guilt. Same thing for material things. In the sense, okay, I have a comfortable situation, I'm going to live it well. I don't have it, that's fine too. And not that we start having problems, that when it's there, I'm happy, and when it's not there, I'm worried. Can I get to that situation and condition my life based on these expectations? So here it actually says abandon panchenshin. Neba is this attachment to wealth, material things, and kurti is the attachment to recognition, power, or authority, respect, recognition. Nedankurti. Nedankurti pagdanshin. And abandon always attachment to fame. Don't try to. Yesterday we said that fame is found in others and not in the quote unquote famous one. But I can think easily, I'm the famous one. I'm the good one. And what happens sometimes is when someone obtains a level of important recognition in a certain context, when that person is not recognized, then he suffers, and so constantly needs to do things to regenerate that recognition. Otherwise, one really feels the lacking of that. I've even artists, for example, those who work with famous artists, they say that some artists are very balanced and they're able to manage fame well, but others they constantly need to create situations, because even if after a while they're not in the news or they're not recognized, they're not in the media, then they go in abstinence. That's when this happens when one feels like I'm the famous one, when instead the fame is in others. And on a small scale, this can happen. Once there's a friend has told me the story that her grandmother said, you need to give men small fish. She said that men like hearing how good they are. So you need to always say, oh, you're so good, you're so strong. Give men the small fish, and then they're happy. But this is something that applies to all of us, that often we want approval, recognition, praise. And when we're in this, so when we don't have it, then we really feel the absence of this, and instead we should really go beyond this. So here, abandon the attachment to material things and recognition, respect, recognition, and abandon always a desire for fame. And this doesn't mean that material things, that pleasures and respect, recognition, that these are negative things in and of themselves. But when it becomes our objective and we make our choices based on these, then it's a trap and we lose ourselves. It's very subtle. So we need to we need to be careful even on a spiritual level, the more the more you, and I'm using the wrong term, the higher up you go in your career, the farther you can fall. I remember once something terrible happened. Without getting into details, a Dharma teacher went to a small center in Latin America, and the rule was that people would pay for this course, whatever that teaching, and then a percentage went to the teacher and a percentage went to the center. And once um, once he was given the envelope of his percentage, he said, no, no, this is not enough. And they tried to explain, no, well, there were some people that they couldn't afford to pay. They couldn't afford to pay, and so I should have a higher percentage. And maybe that logic works, but then it's just completely polluted motivation, isn't it? I mean, why do we do what we do? When we start doing something, when we start doing it for profit or for recognition or for pleasures, we're just reinforcing our material utopia. When at the basis, our objective is to change this paradigm that we have. We need to be careful also, and then we conclude this part, to not go to the other extreme in seeing that material things are bad, and that recognition is not something that we that we should have, is that it's negative, or that pleasures are negative. No, the problem is when we use those things as an end in and of themselves and not as any kind of tool. Actually, even in the Bodhisattva vows, it actually says if someone has an altruistic motivation, a real altruistic motivation, and often those who have that is happy by himself. If someone has this real state of love and compassion for others, so-called bodhicitta, and has the possibility of having wealth and influence, he cannot choose to not have it, cannot renounce to it. Because if any of us really has the intention to help others and is able to help others with or without material resources, with having a good reputation or without a good reputation, with a good reputation. So this for me is an example that material things in and of themselves, fame, whatever it is not in and of itself negative, but it's a trap where one can easily fall into it. One needs a lot of sincerity with oneself. Okay, where am I going? What am I nourishing with my choices? So having few desires, be satisfied, and and exchange and give back acts of kindness. So satisfaction means giving value to what we have. You don't obtain satisfaction by getting material things. You get satisfaction, you become satisfied by valuing what you already have. So the example is, I can be satisfied with an object, this bell, whatever it is. So this bell is good enough for me. I'm content with this singing bowl. I'm satisfied. But I also need other things. So I have many desires, but I'm satisfied with this. But having few desires is, I'm happy with the I have the singing bowl. I don't need anything other than the singing bowl. having having many desires, having many, the more desires that we have in our mundane world, then the more our life is used up, taken up by those desires. Because mostly in our life, the greatest resource we have, and where our life um, um, turns, let's say, is in our mind. And when we have a strong desire for something, we have a strong dissatisfaction, our life is really taken up by that. If it's taken up by good things, then it's good to have those desires. If it's something, if I'm if these desires um, if these desires don't bring to any result, then it's just like going round and round like a merry-go-round. And we use up our time, our life. It has nothing to do with being right or wrong, good or bad, a sin or not. It's a question about saying we have a marvelous condition in this life. We have marvelous conditions in this life. Very quickly, do we have the minimum necessary materially speaking? Yes. Is this normal or is it a luxury? When we look around, when we look at the more or less 8 billion people on this planet, we have a very privileged material situation. So we can't take for granted what we have because it's not that obvious. To have the material conditions that we have. If we didn't have them, probably, unless we have a very developed spiritual the level of spirituality, then our time and our energy would be taken up with our own survival. I remember always when I talk about this, once when I came back from Sao Paulo, Brazil, I arrived at the Malpensa airport. Many of you know the airport of Malpensa, and up to just a couple years ago, and this was a time where at that time the suitcase didn't have the four wheels, comfortable wheels like they do now. And at the time, the trolleys were always missing. I remember once that Lama took a flight, and it took it took him a tremendous so so the Malpensa right from the beginning it was a little mal pensato, which means badly, not thought out well. Malpensa. But now things have changed a little bit. But at the time, it was normal to take 2 30-kilo baggages on this trip. So coming from Brazil, the Brazilians traveled with mountains of luggage. And you'd get there and there weren't be any trolleys. So at that time, I saw these 20 or so people. Sorry, they were dressed well. They seemed very well educated, like wealthy people, and they were all waiting for trolleys with all their luggage. At a certain point, 5 trolleys, after maybe like a half an hour of waiting, when those 5 trolleys arrived, one they're pulling here, the other's pushing, just bad words right and left. They didn't, start kicking and punching. That would have created too much It would have been too much, but they were pushing and shoving, and I got here first. And when I saw that scene, because I needed a trolley too, and I was waiting, but then I was able to put one piece of luggage on top of another, and I pulled. But anyway, I asked myself, instead of trolleys, if that was food and they were hungry, what would have happened? And this takes us to a very important point. We are not better than others. We have better conditions, but this doesn't make us better people. I don't know if that's clear. Because I want to see, I don't want to see, but just as a way to say, I mean, how would we react if we were in a situation where we didn't have security, if we didn't have water, if we weren't safe? Talking to someone a short time ago, that there was a particular situation because I had a situation that happened a short time ago. I'm very grateful for this. In my life, I have not had experiences where people close to me were opposed to me or showed any kind of anger, aggressivity to me. And in this last year and a half, 2 years, not within the center, but connected to the center, there's someone who has an attitude like that towards me. And there I had to really work on how to face this situation. And I really learned a lot from this situation. And talking to a doctor friend recently, he said, I know many people who put a tremendous effort to maintain themselves stable in their principles, their values of nonviolence, when many of their family members have been killed, when there's a tremendous violence connected to people near them. There's a lot of violence, and instead, if someone is just creating some trouble, and that it's creating a little trouble for me, and is a little bit of anger towards me, and that generates aversion, because that would be normal for that to happen. What happens when there are those who are responsible for the death of family members, and they're in the so what would that generate within one's heart? Someone who's responsible for such violence towards people we love. So we have these marvelous conditions, and they're so important because they give us the space so that we can dedicate our time and energy to cultivating the best parts of ourselves. And we also have the second condition, which we have someone who correctly guides us along a spiritual path. I'm not here to praise myself, but we are connected to the tradition. There are many other traditions. I'm not here to say that the Buddhism is the only tradition, the valid tradition, but I'm talking about this ability of looking within and having a context of having a system that shows us, where to go as we look within and who we want to be. And is it the majority of people who have these opportunities? Just think about the people we know, even within our thinking about our family members or at work, or I imagine that that most have that first condition, the minimum necessary, materially speaking. But how many have the ability to be in contact with a sincere, with a sincere spiritual path. And then the third condition is wanting to walk that path. And I can say that having that also that third condition, we are very, very few. And why are these conditions special? Because if they're used well, they allow us to develop the best parts of ourselves and to grow as people, grant with more happiness, more joy, more wisdom, and allows us to offer that to the world. And once we have these qualities, do we want to spend our times, because our time worried about jealousy and envy, and because he said, she said? No, we don't have time to waste. Also because these conditions that we have that allow us, I mean, if they're used well, they allow us to grow spiritually very deeply. I mean, how long are these conditions going to last? Soon we're going to die. I'm not joking. Even if we have a very long life, it all goes by so quickly. And how can we be sure that after our death that we will create the same conditions that we have today? The only way is by using them well, cultivating them well, not taking for granted the conditions that we have. So even as an act of respect towards those who don't have these conditions, we need to use them well. Even having these conditions, we need to do what we can to grow, to offer the best to society, the society in which we're part. So having few desires and being satisfied means I do the possible to not fall into the trap of wanting more and more things that cannot sustain the state of long-term happiness and joy. I mean, we need to have many, many desires, but virtuous ones. It's important to desire stability, desire joy, desire gratitude, desire respect, wisdom, balance. It's very important to desire all of this, because without desiring, then we don't put our energy in that direction. The formal term is, so we use desire for mundane things, and for spiritual things, we talk about having aspiration for more spiritual things. But in the end, the feeling is wanting something and directing our energy towards that thing. So having few desires is an act of giving value to the conditions that we have in this life's opportunity that we have, and which is not at all, we shouldn't at all take for granted. Unfortunately, we often can give value to something once it's lacking, once it's missing, or once we don't have it anymore. But sometimes, unfortunately, we're not. Some things, once we don't have them anymore, it's not possible. It's not possible to get that back. Like when someone dies, for example, we need to value that, the presence of that person while they're alive, and the conditions that we have in this life. Once we don't have them anymore, if we don't know if they'll come back. We can keep them if we really take care well. So need to really make sure that we don't fall into the trap of following things that don't bring any kind of real benefit. So to conclude, the most important resource in our mind, our own thoughts, the mind itself, the energy that we put into things as well. Be careful to not use up our life with things that don't bring us anywhere. Are you following? Right? And I'll just say one more time, these things are not negative in and of themselves, but they don't bring much benefit either. We need to choose. We need to choose with awareness what we want to do with our energy. So having few desires, be satisfied, and give back acts of kindness. When someone does something nice for us, one helps us out, who gives us something, it's important to recognize what we have been given and cultivate a feeling of gratitude. So thanking someone, sometimes if sometimes I go to someone, I say thank you, and they, oh no, don't have to thank me. I wanted to do it. You don't owe me anything. It doesn't mean that I'm thanking you because I am indebted to you. No, I'm thanking because I recognize how important this is. I have this feeling within of like how wonderful, and I recognize the value, and I say thank you. Sometimes we have this idea that thanking comes together with a debt. Even in Portuguese, for example, when we say thank you, we use the word obrigado. You do something nice, instead of saying grato, thank you, I say obrigado, obrigada, which means I have an obligation towards you. You did something for me, and now I am indebted to you. I have a debt towards you. But that's not the point. The point is I give value to what you have given to me. I have gratitude. I know how to value what I've received, and I'm happy for what I've received. This is what gratitude means. I'm not indifferent to what I've received. And if I feel joy, if I feel joy in giving you something, or also in thanking you, I mean, it's important to thank for what we received, regardless of what it is, material level or something intellectual, something spiritual. We should be open and say thank you, and feel that inner gratitude. And so it's only good for ourselves. So don't having the next verse, cultivate loving kindness and compassion. And here we have a problem. There's a word that's very, very important in the along our spiritual path, where you can see that the translations are not the best. It's also a word used a lot in our daily life. What happens to a language when we try to translate a concept which doesn't exist in that language? Or you use a word that doesn't actually mean that, or you use a word in another language, or you try to create a new word. Like I always joke around, say, why do you use the word privacy in Italian? Why don't you use the word that would be the Italian? There is Italian word. Maybe because in the Italian culture, you don't have the idea of privacy. Privacy doesn't exist in the Italian culture. But if we go back maybe 100 years ago, I don't know if as a concept privacy in everyday life existed. Not so given that the concept doesn't exist, then the word doesn't exist. And it takes time also for that word to enter into the culture. So here we have two very important feelings in life. In Tibetan, in Sanskrit, the two different words are used. In Italian, English, Portuguese, etc. In the more common language, just this one word is used for feelings that are very difficult, and that creates a tremendous amount of confusion, and it's the word love. The word love in this context in Tibetan is champa. Champa in Sanskrit is maitri. So love comes from it's in Italian, so it's amore, comes from amare. And if I look at the etymology of the word, it comes from Sanskrit and comes from the term kamare, amare. This is from Italian. So kama, you've heard of maybe of the Kama Sutra. Kama means passionate desire. It's simplifying. If I say I love chocolate, I can say I love chocolate, right? What's the meaning when I say I love chocolate? Do I want chocolate to be happy? No. What are we saying when I say I love chocolate? That when I have chocolate, I feel good. So I project my happiness in the chocolate. When I'm eating the chocolate, I like it. It's good for me. I feel good. So I love chocolate. This is kama. In English, love comes also from a Sanskrit root, which is lubya. And this also means desire. So we have both in English and also in Latin languages, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, etc. We use terms that originally meant passionate desire. So love for chocolate would be the meaning, let's say. So when I say I love you, it means actually I'm happy when I'm with you. I want you. I have desire for you. In this context, we would say I desire you. Even in a relationship, but within a couple, it would be I desire you. It's more honest, no, more transparent, more honest. Instead, in Tibetan, champa or maitri, the other term, is this feeling of attraction for the happiness of the other. But we use love also there. When we say that a mother has love for her child, normally we're making reference to the fact that the mother is the happiness and well-being of the child is important to the mother. So when we talk about love, we're talking about this deep attraction to the happiness and well-being of the other. So if I love you, I'm saying that your happiness is important to me. This means I love you in this context. Some translators to make a distinction, they use loving kindness. I don't know, personally, I don't like it, because loving kindness seems like something being polite, politeness. I need to ask you how you are. I need to, lend a hand when you need. If you fall, I'll help you up. that to me gives the meaning of loving kindness. No, but first of all, we need to look at ourselves here. When we look towards ourselves with sincerity, we'll see that there's a deep part within, and we'll see there's an enormous attraction to happiness and an enormous aversion towards suffering. And we all have this. Not only human beings, but all living beings have this. And this is what we all have in common. We all want to be happy, and no one wants to suffer. It's what pushes us to do what we do, everything we do. So from this point of view, naturally, everyone loves him or herself because he's naturally attracted to his own happiness and has compassion for himself, because compassion is aversion to suffering. So I love you. I want you to be happy. I have compassion for you, but I don't want you to suffer. The process along our path is made up of two parts. First of all, we need to love ourselves better. In loving ourselves better, this doesn't mean to love. There's no one who doesn't want one's own happiness, but certainly we are conditioned, and so we can actually be attracted to things that are detrimental to us. And then we have all these dynamics of like self-sabotage. But these are all parts of like an unhealthy, ignorant process of trying to be happy. Even when one is hurting oneself, one is actually trying to do good for oneself. I don't know if this is clear. One is always looking for one's own happiness. So that first step, when we talk about loving for ourselves, it's about having more and more clarity about what is happiness, how really can I generate more happiness and cultivate that which will bring me more happiness and abandon that which is bad for me, detrimental to my happiness. And as we said before, when we go from the material utopia to a spiritual utopia, then that's one way of loving ourselves better, because I'm then directing myself towards something that can actually sustain that happiness. And then we're also moving from a selfish state. I can't say everyone, but I think we start from a point of selfishness. The definition of selfishness is this obsession with self-gratification, self-obsession, where our number one priority is the I and the mind. I don't want to suffer. I want to be happy. And then I expand it a little bit outwards to that which I consider to be mine. This is a common, ordinary way, egotistical way. Altruism, then it comes when we take this love and compassion, this attraction to happiness, and an aversion for suffering. So when we have that and it's directed exclusively towards ourselves, we can call that selfishness. But for me, altruism is not totally against selfishness. This is my own idea. It could be right or wrong, but from my understanding, altruism is let's say a more mature state of selfishness, because selfishness it's that strength of attraction to happiness, aversion to suffering, directed towards oneself in an obsessive way. I don't want to suffer. I want to be happy. This is my priority. Altruism, instead, is when we take that strength, that force, that desire, that aversion, and love and compassion, that stays directed towards ourselves, but then expands out and includes everyone else. And when one is able to say, your happiness is as important to me as my own. Your suffering is as important to me as my own. And so it's that feeling, that strength that gradually expands out and it includes every other sentient being. So it's not that to generate altruism, I need to exclude and turn away from myself. No, I need to include others without excluding myself. Is this difference clear? Because otherwise, we fall into this dynamic of we say, if I do something for myself, I feel guilty. If I do something for others, I feel like it's a sacrifice. Instead, we need to eliminate this duality and say and think, when I do something that's a need of my own, then I'm doing also for others, because if I'm not well, then I can't help others. And when I can help others, then I'm doing something also for myself, because your happiness is as important to me as my own. This is our objective. So here, this verse says, familiarize yourselves. It says gom in Tibetan. Familiarize yourself with love and compassion, which means in your daily life, in your daily lives. Atisha reminds us to, with awareness, to constantly cultivate love towards oneself and to others. And the key here is to remember that love and compassion towards others starts with something that we already have within. Even the most selfish person that we can find on this planet, maybe the symbol of pure selfishness, is full of love and compassion just towards himself, and needs to open up a little bit and direct himself towards others. The difference is, if I believe that I don't have any love and compassion, how can I have any? Instead, it's a resource that we already have. It's up to us to little by little expand it, and to be able to familiarize ourselves with love and compassion on this path. Somehow we need to overcome this fear that we have to love, because somehow, strangely, we have this feeling that if I open up to others, I'm going to lose something myself. If I give importance to other people's happiness, I'm going to lose something myself. And we live in this dualism. Instead, it's very important for us to go beyond this dualistic reality. Here, which says cultivate love and compassion, it's not something that comes automatically. Where Tisha says, familiarize yourself with love and compassion. He's saying, don't wait for this to happen spontaneously. Put your energy in this with awareness. When you're in front of another person, and my tendency would be maybe to ignore that person, I ask myself, can I allow myself to see that person? Yes. Yes, okay. Because before we love someone else, we need to see that person. Often our block is not seeing the other person, and we see ourselves everywhere. I don't know if that's clear. We see everyone and everything in reference to ourselves, my needs, my desires, etc., etc. And even as human beings, as a species, we've gotten to this obsession with humans. I mean, it's sick. Sorry if I say it like this, from my point of view, where, for example, nothing has any meaning if it's not in relationship to human beings. Something becomes precious and important when it has something in relationship to human beings. Very often it seems only in in relation to an immediate direct in an immediate and direct relationship without understanding the complexities of everything. Like whales, for example, how important are whales for us? Um, I've never seen one, but I like them. They're so nice. But just let's close this morning's teachings with a story of whales. For example, we did this morning and this afternoon, we are doing these breathing exercisings, and I hope that we'll be able to do it in other moments too. So I've heard two explanations based on different research. One explanation says every 3 breaths, of every 3 breaths, 2 of them depend on the oxygen generated from the ocean, and 1 depends on all the vegetation. Others say half-half. Even half-half means 1 breath yes, 1 breath no. That oxygen comes from these micro plants, this plankton and other vegetation in the ocean. But these plants also need to feed, to be nourished. What is a fundamental resource for this plankton is whale poop. And whales eat a lot and they poop a lot. and as and as is pooping, it's also swimming long distances, spreading out his poop. The nourishment, let's say, for the plants that allow us to breathe. Take away the whales, we won't be able to breathe. How much gratitude should we have towards whales? So much. But there's a whole chain of events necessary for the whales to be able to do what they do, and each part of that chain is fundamental to our existence. How much do we depend on each element there? So much happens in the ocean, and the most of us have no idea. But if those whales weren't there, we wouldn't be able to breathe, or even any one of those elements in that chain. So even what we don't see, like all the aspects of this chain, what we don't see, even what we don't see is fundamental to our existence. So without being in a balanced world, we will not be able to live in a balanced way. So going back to the verse, give back acts of kindness, pay back acts of kindness. How grateful should we be towards all the beings who help us? That's if we're not part of the solution, at least let's not be part of the problem. Let's try to help. Let's try to resolve in every way possible, because every small part makes the difference in the whole. And I just remind you one more time, something I've said in other contexts, when we see all the problems on a social or world level, collective level, no one has the burden or the job, the task, or the ability to solve everything, but we all have the burden, or the job of being part of the solution. And the world needs love and compassion more than anything else. Love, compassion, and altruism I don't know what you think about the wars going on now. But where are these wars coming from? It's from selfishness. They're born there. This obsession with the I and the my and the inability to see others. So if I want to be part of the solution, I can't repeat those same dynamics that we see at the root of the wars. I can't repeat this in my world, in my daily life, at work, or with my family or my society, because to go against these roots of war, of this selfishness, I need to cultivate love and compassion and altruism. And we're not going to lose anything at all. We'll gain so much by doing that. So cultivate this feeling, the sincere, deep feeling where we give value and to the happiness and the well-being of everyone that we encounter, respecting also the length of our own legs, and but let's really do the best that we can, and let's start with the people that we interact with in our daily life. Let's start there, okay? And in this way, the verse says, and make your bodhicitta stable by cultivating love and compassion. The consciousness based, your mind based on this altruism, to help this love and compassion for helping others. May it be stable. Okay, it's time for our dedications.
Drove Michel taktu ne gyurche kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche chi sadan lamge yente rabzone dorje change kopa nyurtob sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delekshin Ninsen takto delekpe kuncho sumki chingi lop kuncho sumki ngodrub tsol kuncho sumki trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Have a good lunch. Thank you. And we'll meet back at 3 o'clock today.